2026. Spring is here. We're in the Nauset Meeting Room of Town Hall. It's 10 o'clock. On the top of our agenda is the Zoom link if you wish to join us that way, as well as a phone number and a webinar ID to use. So anyone here, I should do welcome to everybody at the table. So our committee members, Bob Mullen, Lynn Bruneau, John Smith, Kevin Galligan. You laugh at me. There's a lot in the head.
Morning.
It really is morning. Judith Booth, Jenny Farber, and George Missouri from staff, Karen Sharpless. Welcome, everybody. Online, we have our committee member, Mary Wright, also Mike Giggy and Tim Harrison, our consultants, and welcome, everybody. So anyone here for public comment? Anyone on Zoom for public comment?
No hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So we do have correspondence, an email. Mr. Carlson was here at last meeting, and this, I would say, George, was more just a follow-up from Charlie's presentation. I would just say thank you, Charlie, for writing it up. We have it in the file. These are not items yet scheduled on the agenda, but we will get to them. So, any comments from folks on this correspondence at this moment? Okay. All right, so we have town meeting coming up, and, oh, yes, Charlie, please.
I just wanted to note that on March 31st, I sent a follow-up email to George Missouri that covered this territory that's in my March 26th email. And when the committee takes up these issues, it would be helpful to have both be part of the dialogue. I am interested in knowing when the committee might take up these questions, both with respect to the interim measures and with respect to the TMDL. Two different things, obviously.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, so we have town meeting. I thought I brought the article planner. Here it is. So Mark Reel was finalizing the warrant booklet yesterday. Of note for us on the town meeting articles are numbers 16, land I'm moving off the fire station. Sorry. Article 25 is the FY27 wastewater management plan implementation. Thank you, Rich, for modifying this to be a little bit more encompassing, but embedded in that is phase 4. And the write-up in the booklet does describe that. And then, of course, Article 26 is kind of, if necessary, funding additional dollars to appropriate in the event bids come over. Rich, when are the bids due on
Because I'm
Lakes and
hearing
Ponds?
lots of questions
25th,
on that. So are we anticipating that there's going to be an overage?
No.
this
The
is
bids are
belts and
opening on
suspenders.
April 28th.
April 28th.
You know, you never know. You never know a cost of a project until the bids come in. I think our team has been really good in being able to put together projected cost, and we hope that that will continue. But what's important about it is the fact that to stay eligible for SRF and to stay with their deadlines, they have sequential deadlines you
Right.
got to meet. You need to have a construction contract in place by June 30th, 2026. And so that's our fixed figure right there, is that our fixed deadline. And if for some reason we open bids on the 28th and we need another $100,000 or another $500,000, maybe another $2 million, I don't know. We have an article that we can act on at that meeting. So we don't have to call a special town meeting before June 30th to try to get additional funding to move that project forward. I think the key takeaway, any additional funding that is approved at that town meeting, should we act on it, that would still be eligible for the SRF 0% interest
And the subsidy.
loan.
And the
So,
subsidy as
and the
well.
subsidy as well. So it's on there, really as a contingency. We hope we don't have to act on it, but I think we all feel better with it being there just because of the timing things, the bid opening, the warrant closing. We decided to put it in there.
Yeah, and I've got a little intelligence in our neighbors who have received bids recently. I can't remember if it was Yarmouth or Dennis, but their bids came in very, let's say, many number of contractor proposals and a wide range of bids, including the one they chose was way under their estimate. So, but the range I saw was in the orders of tens of millions of dollars different. I mean, one was like 48 million, and the one they're going with is in the 20 million. How can they
Whoa,
be so different?
Because
Would almost
ours
make me nervous.
classically
It's
have
like, did you
not,
understand the bid? Yeah.
ours classically have not been that far apart. have they?
Phase two was under by a couple million, wasn't it?
But a couple million on a
Right.
total of something, as opposed to
Right,
what you're
right,
describing,
yeah.
is
There were tens of millions of difference.
my point.
Yeah, yeah. So, but, John, were you going to add?
No, I was just thinking the thing of Hormuz going, it's the
Oh, will that affect?
oil and gas.
Oh,
But anyway, that's,
interesting. Didn't,
yeah.
Yeah, George?
And just to add, as far as outreach and making the public aware of this, Amanda Converse is all over the town meeting and the articles. I think Rich did a podcast or recorded a podcast that'll be up and available with other podcasts related to town meeting articles. There are 3 outreach events the week prior to town meeting that she will be participating in. We can sit in on any of those and probably will to make sure any questions are answered. So it sounds like the town has an organized way to get the word out comprehensively about the town meeting, all the articles, and I don't think we need to do separate outreach on these.
And April 15th is kind of a workshop afternoon with town staff, doing additional recordings. That's from 3 to 5. And then
I'm sorry, what was that name again?
April 15th.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. And then we'll be also meeting at, I believe, 6 o'clock on a pre-town meeting warrant review. So that'll be with the town clerk, town council, and the moderator. So we'll go through each and every article. So I'm sure staff will be here if questions are up on any of the items. But the other nice thing is, the warrant only has 35 articles. So that's
Which 14 are consent.
consent in the first 14. So it, you know, it's a focused meeting on really just one major item, fire rescue.
And the Orleans Pond Coalition is again preparing a pre-town meeting mailer, probably a trifold.
Good.
That will hopefully go out and advocate for some of these water articles.
Yeah, great.
Excellent.
True to their mission.
Yeah. And I'm seeing Mary on.
You didn't go through your list, you didn't finish.
Yeah, so I was covering just those that were wastewater related.
Yeah.
So those are the 2.
You did phase 4 and phase 3, but then we have Mill Pond,
Okay, that is
32.
30, thank you, Lynn. So Article 32 is the Mill Pond Quality Improvement. So those are the short-term identified measures that we now need to fund for design and implementation.
The other 2 that are tangentially related would be, arguably the Sewer Enterprise Fund, which is Article 21.
Right.
And then, arguably as well, the Capital Improvements Plan, which is Article 23, because it takes the sewer funding out for 5 years.
Right.
But, just because it's got the name in it, but
Right. Yeah, one thing, if you remember too, on the next article, which is 24, funding the FY '27 capital budget.
there's nothing in there.
There was nothing in there, but just so you know how the flow of that will go, because if you remember, there was a motion to kill the entire capital budget at last meeting.
The way
Oh,
it
yeah.
was structured.
Because of just one line item. So what we've done this year is, it'll be Article 24, but they're going to be sub-articles. So it'll be Article 24-1 for this specific group, Article 24-2 for this group. So people have a sense of what the money's for, if it's highway-related or if it's stabilization fund. There'll be logic to each of them. So the hope is to have it be clear and
And
not blow up the
importantly-
entire capital
and,
budget.
Yeah, and importantly, the divisions are, all the vehicles and equipment are together.
Right.
Buildings and facilities are together, and then the water special revenue beaches, enterprise, transfer station, enterprise, ambulance, refer, all of these are separate because they get categories and then funding strategies.
right.
And the one real separate standalone are the ones that need the three-quarter vote because they were never in the CIP before. And there are 5 things in that list, but none of them are what I would perceive to be controversial. So hopefully, what's not in the draft that I've been working on is naming what the votes are, because I think I know that the ones that are same old are just a simple majority. And then the exception is the three-quarter vote for the ones that were not in the CIP before. So hopefully we'll avoid, as you say, last year's dogfight on the floor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think that's good. So I think, George, as you indicated, the outreach and support we have with staff, I mean, more what we can do to pass the word through other, as Judith mentioned, other organizations that we may be affiliated with. You know, I know, Mary, you're still on the Citizens Forum. If there's a opportunity for us to, you know, provide some assistance there, let us know.
That meeting is April 30th, and yes, I think Rogers sent you an email, I think, Kevin, about seeing who would be the right person to come talk about the sewer article.
Oh, thanks for that
Oh,
reminder.
and we
Yes.
had an Exit 89 Zoom session on Monday to be planning our article that, our issue that goes out the week before the meeting, and what we're going to be focused on for
Yeah.
that article.
Okay, great.
You know, Rich, I'm thinking on the Citizens Forum, I mean, I'd be happy to be there, but I'm thinking in terms of really boots on the ground type questions that, I mean, we've all seen the knowledge base in this town grow about sewers, and they're getting very specific. And I'm thinking the handoff from committee to staff might be more in order. So, Mary, what I'm thinking, if Rich is comfortable on the
Yep.
Citizens Forum, to really have him be the spokesperson on sewer, you guys agree? I mean, especially where, like, even the article about the contingency funds, I would much rather have you say that because you're close to the procurement issues, the DEP requirements. We could all repeat them, but you live it. And if you're comfortable, that you might be the better spokesperson.
I'm perfectly happy. Actually, I'm entering it into my calendar
Okay.
right now. The date, I know a time wasn't mentioned, but I'm just kind of recording the date, unless you know a time.
5:30 to 7.
Okay.
Get there at 5.
Good. So I'll
I'll tell
respond.
Roger.
I'll respond to Roger as well, Mary, just to lock that in. Rich, that's good. And we'll be there for any support, you know.
It's great practice leading up to town meeting. It's fantastic. I mean, the podcast was great yesterday. I think a lot of information came out of that podcast to just talk a little bit about history and how we got to here today and what Phase 4 planning looks like. And so I'm happy to do it, happy to support any way I can.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. So again, don't be shy about a thought that comes to mind after this meeting, you know, bump into somebody and they say, hey, I don't know about, I mean, as we know, even when we went to the Finance Committee in the last 2 sessions, so much of this information is available, it's just sometimes finding it. You know, and between Rich and I and others, it's like the question about estimates of connection. And, you know, I remembered, you know, Rich polled as best he could. We had 3 tiers of cost, answered the question. And again, Finance Committee member didn't even know that was out there. And, I mean, no criticism of him, but it's tough to find this stuff. It really is, you know? So, all right, you guys, I think we're good on town meeting articles. As soon as,
Sorry, Kevin.
ahead.
Even though in the presentation on April 2nd to the Finance Committee, I think one of the things that at least 1 or 2 people got confused about was the juxtaposition of the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund subsidy. That slide was right in front of the Massachusetts
Right.
Clean Water.
right,
And if you weren't paying attention to the headline
Yep.
and seeing that they were different, you could sort of suddenly keep reading the fine print and miss the fact that we're talking about 2 different sources of money
Right.
with two different uses of the money. And that was, I think, what got into an earlier draft that did get corrected at the last minute. So it's a cautionary tale.
Well, I'll tell you, the Clean Water Trust presentation we had in terms of how they envision, this was way back to 2018, I remember precisely, Nate Keenan from Clean Water Trust said, the easiest way to explain the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund is it literally bolts on
Yes.
to the Clean Water Trust. So the Clean Water Trust through SRF is the driver, and this additional subsidy literally just,
Starts
screws in.
with that and then it uses a percentage of what you've already been approved for and goes with it, yeah.
But he used that term bolt on, and it's like, it made so much sense mechanically, it's
Right.
like. All right, so growth in watershed loads. Mike, you've been doing a little bit of work on how we're looking. Good morning.
Well, good morning, all. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Good. Let me show you some slides. How we doing?
Looks good.
Okay. So the topic is generally looking at how we're applying the water use database that AECOM has been developing. It's pertinent for several reasons. This morning, I'd like to just summarize the work that Mike Pierce has been doing in conjunction with Tim and how it fits into work that is ongoing with the Pleasant Bay Alliance. And the fundamental issue I'm dealing with here, I'm seeking your support, is using a 5-year block of water consumption data as sort of the basis for two things. First, a basis for tracking growth in septic loads over time, and two, as sort of the formal basis for granting credits when sewers are put in place to eliminate that septic load.
Nice.
So that's where we're going today. And think back to the water use database. Why are you doing that? Well, many, many reasons. And let me just say, the more I get into it, the more I realize it's a very resourceful thing to be doing. So the water use database allows you to fine tune the design of future sewer phases. Think back to phase 3 and phase 4, where Tim was able to pinpoint the expected nitrogen load for each little neighborhood, and that's the way it should be done. So that's a good use of that. And I know you're using this water use information as a basis for betterments and capacity allotments. Don't forget, there's an expansion of the wastewater treatment plant coming. And whereas the original design was based on more general data, now you're going to have some real life water use numbers to deal with. So that's a good benefit. And thinking ahead to watershed permitting in Nauset, you can use the database to show Eastham how you're estimating septic loads in Orleans and urging them to do something similar in Eastham. We can use the database as a way to measure growth in the Pleasant Bay watersheds and as a basis for sewer nitrogen credits. The last two I'm showing in blue here because these are the two applications of the database that I want to talk about today. So let's pan out a little bit and talk about the Pleasant Bay Alliance. Remember that the permit was first issued, the watershed permit was first issued in 2018 with a thought that it would be amended every 5 years. Well, that year 5 amendment was signed on February 10th of this year. It took a couple extra years due to COVID and a number of technical studies that had to be completed. But an important part of the new permit is the commitment by the 4 towns to undertake these 9 tasks. And you should really briefly understand about all of them. It's pretty clear to everybody that the linked watershed embayment model, the MEP, Mass Estuary Project model, that generated the TMBLs was fine at the time, but there's lots of reasons why we might need to fine tune and rerun that model. The second task I'm going to talk about more today, and that is we need a protocol for how towns can get credits for sewering. If you think back to the Targeted Watershed Management Plan, the document that pulled together the 4 CWMPs in the watershed, We had the foresight then to lay out as appendices to that report, formal protocols to say, if you want to remove nitrogen load by sewering, here's how you do it. If you want to remove nitrogen load by shellfish aquaculture, here's how you do it. If you want to reduce your fertilizer use at the golf course, here's how you do it. Well, frankly, there wasn't one for sewering. I can't understand why we didn't do that, but a number of questions have come up. Okay, just how do you do that? Do you include nitrogen loads that might be removed from the recharge areas of public water supply wells? Do you use 1 year's worth of data? Do you use 5 years worth of data? How do you really do that? So item number 2 is really my focus today, and will be with the Alliance work group coming up. Items 3 and 5 deal with fine tuning the protocol for golf course nitrogen reductions related to improved fertilizer use. There is an existing protocol, but it needs to be fine tuned. Another task is pretty important to Orleans is documenting further attenuation in the Poachy Neck system. If we're going to update the model, we need to be thinking about how we determine the threshold loads. There's a lot to that. That's going to be an important task just before number 1. And because golf course removals and sewering protocols and Poachy Neck are all part of the mix, both Brewster and Orleans have committed to updating their plan for nitrogen removal because of those revised protocols and attenuation.
And Mike, can I ask you to pause just on that Poachy
Sure.
attenuation, only because I think a few others here in the room did go to the Pleasant Bay Alliance held a marsh symposium a couple of weeks ago, and I am so intrigued by the work of Coastal Studies on what they're calling their geomarsh project. They're doing it in Chatham. It's replicable to our marshes, and I went up to the speaker. I said, would you be interested in giving an Orleans proposal? She said, I would love it. So I think they've got this down. Mike, this does core sampling. It does evaluation of seasonality. I think it really could be something that we could consider. I don't think it's really high expense because of the tools that are now being used. It was fascinating. And I think it only helps us further document the health of the system. And the more we know about it, I think the more we can represent the work it does to avoid sewers. So,
Kevin, I'll be glad to follow up with Mike, because that 604B grant program still hasn't been advertised. I
Yeah.
don't know if there's a federal, trickle through that's causing that, but we haven't seen it yet. So we'll follow this up. Great.
So there's a whole approach we need to talk about with respect to this item number 4 on this list. And there's a lot of money to be saved for Orleans if we can document greater attenuation. And the trick is to find the most expedient way to do that that's scientifically sound and also maximizes the grant funding available to do it, or minimizes the town's share. So when the watershed permit was updated, one of the principal things that DEP asked we do is start to look at how much watershed nitrogen loads are going to increase in the future. Now, remember when the when the Targeted Watershed Management Plan was put in place, it really focused on removing existing nitrogen loads without thinking about the fact that as loads increase, so does the need to remove additional nitrogen. So a fairly late in the game approach was taken to add growth allowances into the nitrogen removal requirements of the 4 towns. And it was each town was on its own, and there were 4 towns, and they took 5 approaches, and it was a little bit chaotic. It happened at the end. George did a good job representing Orleans, but the requirement that DEP now has put in place, and the 4 towns has agreed to, the towns are going to work together for a more consistent method of estimating growth, and such that when the next permit amendment comes into play, February 2026 plus 5 years would be February 31. That next amendment should have better estimates of growth and developed with a consistent, scientifically based approach. So item 8's an important one, and what I'm going to talk about today is how you might lay the groundwork to do that. So the ninth task is to get a sense on some sort of metric that we can use to judge how much flushing there is, how does the bay hydrodynamics change over time. And that's going to be important to be done, and it might have some direct applicability to the Nauset system. What do you think?
So Mike, before you move on the slide, I just, not to belabor item 1, but is DEP in a position to fund that process?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask that.
Sorry.
Um,
Because
Well-
in the past, didn't they fund all of the TMDL work that SMAS did?
The towns had a share of the MEP reports, but probably 3/4 of it was funded by the state.
All right, that's enough for now. Yeah, but
Just a bit of elaboration. You can view the Mass Estuaries Project as a state-funded project with local town
contributions.
labor and some cash. But the result was estimates of nitrogen loading and removal requirements in TMDLs that have the seal of approval of Mass DEP. There's been some talk about, in the future, perhaps the towns need to take a greater share of the load. In fact, maybe even doing the work and getting more support from the state. And I've argued against that because I think you can see how each town might take a different approach.
Right.
And the seal of approval that this is a Mass DEP project opens a lot of doors, covers a lot of questions, gives a lot of comfort to people. So that's an elaboration on your question, Kevin, but it's a can of worms. So
Yeah.
we'll be talking about that in the future for sure.
Okay, thanks.
So here's a slide you've seen before. Remember the Mass Estuaries Project approach for estimating septic nitrogen load is shown here in these 6 items. And the big picture we talked about last time was the only thing that's measured is so far has been water use, and the other factors come from the literature. And I argued last time that we need to position ourselves so that when this protocol gets formalized and when remodeling of the bay occurs, perhaps we're going to use some real-life data and not these from literature citations. But for today, I want to talk about water use. Yes, it's measured. Well, how is it measured? How long a database do you need to know that you've accounted for year-to-year or watershed-to-watershed variability? So I really we're going to be talking about the MEP approach to accounting, but really homing in on that, the water use and how you measure it. So this is an important slide. There's a lot here. Let me see if I could just cover the high points. Remember, the Mass Estuaries Project report was done in 2006, and it reported water use in the various subwatersheds for each town. Unfortunately, the database available at the time varied by town. The Brewster water use is based on a 24-month period spanning from mid-2002 to mid-2004. Chatham's was 2002 to 2004, but the full year in each case, so 36 months. Harwich initially was 1 year, 2004, and later was expanded for 2 more years. Interesting, Orleans was based on mid-2002 to mid-2003, a mere 12 months, 4 quarters worth of data. And that's maybe if we turn the clock back, we'd all agree, yeah, we need to use that because that's all that's available. But these are numbers that are used to set TMDLs, generate multi-million-dollar sewer projects. So I've long been an advocate for let's make sure if we're going to make towns spend money, let's make sure we've got a sound basis. Right. So the Pleasant Bay Alliance received funding from EPA in their SNEP, Southeast New England program, in around 2020. And SMAS did an update. And I think strategically, they didn't just rely on whatever the towns had, they insisted upon a 5-year period of record, 2011 to 2015, covering 60 months. So a much better database. Now here we are in Orleans, looking at a 5-year database, 2020 to 2024, and more current. So I often stumble when I'm describing these various databases, but let me take you through this. If you look at the first block here, you get 4 towns. I simply call this 2003 data. Okay, it's not exactly, but you can see why I call it.
Right.
And then for the SNP data, I look at the midpoint, 2013, and an approximate midpoint for your current database is 2023. So we have 2003, 2013, and 2023. We have two 10-year segments, which is a good database for judging growth, but with some major caveats. And what I'm trying to do now, working with Tim, is to kind of attack those caveats. So, as I said, the TMDLs are based on about 2003 water use, but it's a different period for each town. So how do you effectively share costs when you've got different databases? That's always been a wrinkle in the MVP approach. And for my client, the town of Orleans, we're spending a lot of money based on a single year's worth of data. Now, remember, this is adaptive management. You take what you have, you move forward, you build in checkpoints so you can fine tune, so you don't over or underbuild. And that's exactly what this exercise is today, is in developing some possible mid-course corrections. Another interesting point of view that I find interesting is that in Harwich, the report went ahead with 1 year's worth of data, but it was later found to be largely bogus. The data didn't cover the entire town.
They made it
It was a major faux pas. But Harwich stepped forward when they were updating their CWP in 2007 and asked SMAS to update the water use. So if you go back to my prior slide, I'm showing Harwich 2004 to 2006. That was the basis for later work, but the TMPLs were set based on the single year and numbers that were viewed widely as just plain incorrect. So, and this gets to the discussion we've had about TMDLs and how you set them. So the TMDLs were set. Let's take Muddy Creek Upper and Lower, largely impacted by Chatham and Harwich. They're based on data that was very suspect for Harwich. Now, the good news is that Harwich paid SMAS to update the data, and the watershed permitting approach has been based on that broader, more correct Harwich database. So I think it's good. But DEP's advice, and I bring this up a couple of times a year, shouldn't we be updating the TMDL to match what we're doing? We have a watershed permit that we think if we achieve its goals that we've met the TMDLs. Well, technically we will not have, because the TMDLs never got changed for Muddy Creek. And the reason I put this on the slide is the message repeatedly from DEP and EPA is so much work to change a TMDL. Let's just go with what you have, and with a wink and a nod, know that we're going to call it meeting the TMDL. But the TMDL setting and revision process is so cumbersome in their view, they've asked us not to do it, even in the watershed permit. So, well, I'm showing you some real numbers now. I use Meeting House Pond as an example. There's a column here for each year, 2020 through 2024, 5-year period. The far right is the average of that 5 years. I've looked at the number, Tim has provided me the number of parcels, the water use, the total water use annually in that sub-watershed. And then I've computed the water use per parcel. And you recall, we've regularly used that number to estimate septic nitrogen load. So the real question today is a 5-year database like this, is it long enough? Is there enough scatter in the data that we should not be comfortable with it, or is it reasonable? And that's kind of like, I'm looking for your opinion on that as you see some more of this data. So if we look just at Meeting House Pond, the MEP work, based on single years of data, set the TMDL as 1,871 kilograms per year. And remember, that's 100% of the septic load estimated at that time. So the septic load was estimated to be 1,871. Well, then we turn the clock ahead 10 years nominally, and there's the SNAP number at over 2,100. It implies a 14% growth from the MEP number. Is that real?
No, that's
I don't
definitely
think
not.
it is.
I mean-
I don't think it is, but, compare those first two lines. The first one is just a single year's worth of data. The second one's a 5-year average. So there's some more meat in that estimate, I think. Well, if you go back to the numbers I just showed you that Tim developed, the septic load averages 1,888. So compare those. The MEP works at the TMDL at 1871. The most current 5 years shows 1888. Huh. Okay.
Not bad.
And what's happened in the meantime? There's been a change in the type of water meter, for example. There's maybe been some more attention paid by homeowners to how they use water. So another point on the curve is what's in the watershed permit? The watershed permit, remember I said we worked hard to include a growth allowance. And the growth allowance for Meeting House Pond gets you up to 2,265. And I looked back at what George and I did to develop that, and we decided to use the SNEP data as a good database. And we made that decision based on the SNEP data all across town. But I don't think we thought far enough ahead to realize in the Meeting House Pond sub-watershed, the SNEP number is quite a bit higher than I would think is appropriate.
Right.
So, you can see we're doing this to try to lay the groundwork so that when the growth allowance gets addressed again in the year 2030, that watershed permit requirement for Orleans and this sub-watershed comes down, and I think it will. So my initial conclusions are these. I think we have justification using the AECOM water consumption database to conclude that 100% sewing of Meeting House Pond does indeed meet the TMDL. And I'm comparing 1871 and 1888. So that's been on the table, and part of the state requirement in updating the watershed permit is to get to that issue. Because remember, we raised our hands early on to say, hey, the SNAP numbers, we can't get there with current water use. So I think we've solved that.
And Mike, could you, again, just go back to the previous slide with the 5 years of data? So there are a lot of data types around this table, and my initial reaction is there is such consistency in this data that tells me the 5-year average is, again, good information. It's the best we have. It's improved from what we had earlier. So again, my general gut is this is good to go. I mean, there's not a lot of variability. I mean, there's a little here and there, but there's no major outliers that depart from this trend. Agreed? Jenny?
But a thought is that we're some of that data was collected during COVID, and some of that data at this end, the 24 end, is when water restrictions have been in place.
Right.
So going forward, there will still be water restrictions in place that will lower the amount of water used and could skew things in a funny way.
Have you thought of that, Mike? That's really
Yeah,
important.
I'm gonna interrupt. It's a good comment. I've got some slides later on
There we
to get
go.
to that
Okay.
question of variability. So
Great.
let's just hold that. But it is a good point.
And John's got one addition.
Just got one question. Okay, so we're talking growth. We talked about the growth number. The growth number you're referring to is the kilograms per year growth number over time, correct?
Yes.
So, and we had estimated, in our previous estimations, we'd always planned for 5%. for.
4%, yeah.
4 to 5% per year, or was it per year?
Over the 20-year
Over
period.
the 20-year period, okay, over the 20-year period. So I'm just, but as that period condenses, as we get closer to it, that period of growth, we estimated that we looked at land acquisition, because nitrogen comes from people, for all intents and purposes. How many more people will be using that plot of land going forward? And you had looked at the plots for those particular watersheds, and there was enough to say that, yeah, 5% growth over a period of time could be accommodated by any of the plots that we have.
And it's an estimate, but we just looked, we looked at a 20-year period of the growth in the number of dwellings in the
Yeah.
watershed, and then going forward, we sort of identified how many vacant lots or developable lots or subdividable lots are available. So without getting too far into that, yeah, that's the approach.
But over time, that will do, we have a limited amount of space left, right? So,
Under present zoning.
under present zoning, you're absolutely right, under present zoning. So it's just a question of, if it continues under present zoning, there'll be fewer and less percentage that we'll need to.
Definitely.
to worry
There's
about. Okay, I'm just.
Open space acquisitions, et cetera, yeah.
Okay. Judith?
So, Mike, are you going to further talk about the consumptive use? Because that's the other piece that I sort of wonder about, and this whole idea
I
of
was-
having metered for outside of the house use.
It's, you were thinking back to the previous conversation we had last month, Judith, and it's important. For now, I'm trying to get some decisions made and some direction started with the Alliance based on the MEP accounting.
Okay.
And this ties into John's comment. When we're talking about, if you're at the school, on the school board, and you talk about growth, are you talking about number of school-age children?
Yeah.
If you're a town planner, you're talking about developable lots. If you're in watershed permitting on the Cape, you're talking about nitrogen load.
Right.
There can be growth if it's on the non-sanitary side. Everybody starts to fertilize. No new houses, but everybody fertilizes more, or the reverse of that. What if homes that are, what if, I use this example a lot, Widow Jones passes away and her 50-gallon per day water use becomes 350 gallons per day because the Brown family and their 4 kids moves in? What if the Johnson family decides, instead of just using the 4-bedroom house in the summer, they decide to come year round? So all of those contribute to growth. It's not just vacant lots. And that's what makes this really difficult. And that's, I think, one of the reasons to have a long-term database. Yes, Mrs. Widow Jones passed away and the house all of a sudden they used more, but all of a sudden another house went in the other direction.
Right.
What was vacant for a year because it didn't sell. So all of those things wrap into this, and we should, looking at this slide, if I showed you this slide and showed you the same water use every year, you should call me crazy.
Right, it's going to vary.
But, yeah, and getting to know the data, getting to know the variability is really what this is all about. And if Ginny's comment is great, and I've got another slide to get right to it, but if increased knowledge and awareness of overwatering and water conservation in general comes more into play, you expect the numbers to go down. But if it's based on the same number of people, it means that the nitrogen load has not changed. So I'm trying to stay away from getting into the consumptive use argument and the measurements you're taking at the wastewater treatment plant. That's kind of like another level. But
Yep.
let's
Okay,
get this understood first.
Thank you.
Okay. So my conclusion is I think we're all set with Meeting House Pond, TMDL, and I'll write a memo to that effect for you guys to look at and to circulate to the Alliance and DEP. I'm growing concerned about some variability or some unexplained things I'm seeing in the SNEP data. So I'm going to kind of, in further analyses, I'm going to treat with a little bit more caution things that came from that report. And I think the approach we're taking here is a good basis for projecting growth, and I'll have more on that. So if we're going to be comfortable, and thank you for your opinion, Kevin, that you're comfortable, we need to make sure that we either are consistent with past estimates, or we know why we're not. And in the SNAP, in the SNAP database, I think it's going to be that latter category. But shouldn't we look at typical per parcel water use all across town, sub-watershed by sub-watershed, and maybe there's something about a couple of sub-watersheds that we need to spend more time on because they're outliers, maybe. And how does the per parcel water use change year by year? That's the topic we just started to address, and I'll have more for you on that. So the premise I'm putting forth here, and I think I'm ready to conclude this based on your input, is that if we update the period of record annually, so we have a 5-year period, when we get to 2030, we're going to have a 10-year period, and we can statistically look at the data and intelligently compare it with the MEP and SNAP data and come up with a better estimate of growth than we've done so far. So that's the premise. I think this analysis leads me there. And I think 5 years is a current water use is a good thing to do. So in any one year, 2029, the best number Orleans can put forth is the previous 5 years water use based on the MEP accounting until we change that. So I think we're there. But to your question, Kevin, about variability, let's look across how the numbers vary across the sub-watersheds. Tim gave me data on 24 sub-watersheds. The annual average across all of them is 172 gallons per day per parcel. So let's talk about that. When I saw that, I said, hey, I like that number. And here's why I like it. I had an assignment for the Cape Cod Commission years ago where I looked at the annual statistical summaries put out by every town water department and every private water company. And the average across the Cape was 169. So this is in the same ballpark. I get some comfort from that. Tim has filled in the blanks. When we have a property that is in the watershed but doesn't have a public water service, has a private well, what do you do in that case? Well, the last time we looked at this, we picked a number of, help me with that, Tim, was it 160, I think, 159. So all of these data include private wells at 159. So that past analysis we did probably should be updated, but still, it's in the same ballpark. And if you look at town-wide water use in Orleans in the residential sector, it's about 150. So we've always wondered whether it's town-wide data applicable to the portion of town called the Pleasant Bay watershed. Probably not. And now we've got some indication that probably water use is greater in the Pleasant Bay area. So let's look at all 24. What was the lowest? The lowest was 90. The highest was 254. Toss out the very high and the very low, and you get a range of about 140 to 220. No surprises there. Right. I would expect that sort of variability. You've got some watersheds that have a lot of seasonal homes. We've got some that are lightly occupied, et cetera. So the lowest three are Baker Pond, Deep Pond, and Uncle Seth's. The highest three are the Gould Pond Well, Meeting House Pond, and Quonset Pond. Now, no effort's been made here to segregate commercial versus residential, but I gotta believe the boatyard pumps up the average for Meeting House Pond a little bit.
Right.
The Gould Pond Well at the very highest and Baker Pond at the very lowest, those are pretty darn small. So I don't, they're reasonable outliers.
Gould Pond is in the drinking water watershed. The whole watershed to Gould Pond is our drinking water wells. I don't
Yeah.
believe that there are any residences at all in the watershed to Gould,
Nobody lives
Yeah,
there.
or businesses.
Yeah, well, Tim and I looked at this in detail on the maps, and there is a subdivision that's in Orleans. And it's not the watershed to Gould Pond, it's the tributary areas of the Gould Pond well.
Okay, okay.
So
Okay.
Tim, do you want to add to that?
No, I was just going to say it's exactly what you said. There is a subdivision tucked behind your watershed area, which is within the boundary that was counted.
So would that be Brewster?
Nope.
No, it's Orleans, so, I'm gonna draw a map, so, what subdivision, George, are we
The,
talking about? Is it off of Eli
Cottage
Rogers?
Colony off 28, is that what we're talking about?
Talking Eli Rogers? That,
Must be Eli Rogers.
I'm trying to pull up a map that I can share with you.
Eli Rogers is about 5 Orleans homes and then a few
And-
Brewster. The end
and
of
well,
Eli
Tim-
Rogers Road is in Brewster.
yeah,
And while Tim is looking up that map, if you look, if you're a statistician, you recognize that it's not unusual to have the outliers be those that have a small sample size.
right, so
So
that's,
there, in
Okay.
Baker Pond in
Gotcha.
Orleans has 7 homes. And
Okay,
so it's,
yeah. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, because Eli
thanks,
Rogers
Rich.
wouldn't be in the Gould Pond watershed.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, Tim's looking for the map.
yeah. Let me
I'll
proceed.
get there. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
let's
go ahead.
proceed.
I'll let you know when I've got it back.
Okay,
Yeah,
sounds
we'll
good.
come back to that. So with respect to looking all over the watershed by sub-watershed, these numbers don't scare me. It seems to me to be an expected level of variation watershed to watershed. So I'll put a check mark in that category. So let's look at the variability across the 5-year period. And this is getting to the earlier questions. So when I say average, I'm taking 5 annual totals and adding them up and dividing by 5. Simple arithmetic average. I've also looked at the standard deviation. How much scatter is there about the average? And the simplest measure to look at is the variance. So you take the standard deviation, and if it's a good tight data set, it's a pretty small percentage of the average, and that's what the variance is. So if you look at the variance across the entire Pleasant Bay watershed, it's only 10%. And I hadn't thought a lot about this, but I sort of thought it might be 20 or 25%. So that gives me some comfort. On a sub-watershed basis, some were quite low, 3 or 4%, and a couple were high. The low variance, that is where the data is pretty tight around the average, Crystal Lake and Namaquay River. And the ones where there was higher than average variance was Tark Hill at 18 and Lonnie's at 14. So whether we're looking at variation geographically or variation with time, I'm pretty happy. So Tim, can you help us with Can
Yeah.
you help us with the Gould Pond well watershed?
Yep. Let me request the ability to share here.
Looks like you're given that power, Tim.
Do I need to?
Let me try that again now that you've stopped sharing. And share.
Only one at a time can share.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Can everybody see my screen here?
There we go, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to orient you, the red lines are the subwatersheds, white lines are the town boundaries. So you can see this here is the Gould Pond well. And so the load is coming from this Shorewood. Who else is back here? Yeah, it's mostly along Shorewood and whatever the Orleans version of Flax Pond Road is.
Oh,
That's
Pond extension.
the direction that,
Baker's Pond Road.
oh, it's that side. So that's,
Yeah, it's on the other side of 28.
so you consider that
Right.
to be a Gould? how
It
did
is
that-
within the
other side
watershed.
of 28? I'm completely lost.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, this is 28, and this is.
The yellow line is
6.
28?
that's Route 6.
This is Route 6.
Yeah.
Okay, Route 6 I get.
On the other side of Route 6.
That's Baker's Pond.
Okay,
That's,
This is
That's
Baker's
Baker.
Pond here.
and that's Gould, gotcha.
okay.
Okay,
So it's this, these guys here, within the town,
Yeah,
within Gould's Pond Well that was counted.
okay.
okay.
Maps are good. Thanks, Tim.
Sure thing.
So that's a preview of the database. Thank you.
Yep.
You see all the layers and the pull downs? I'm excited.
Yeah, this is actually just Google Earth Pro, but yeah, it's all out there.
But isn't that reassuring too, to see that amount of watershed protection
Oh,
between that development and Gould Pond?
Yeah,
I mean, nitrogen is still getting there, but, yeah,
500 acres.
hopefully a lot of other stuff isn't.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Tim.
Sure thing.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So, I'm trying to build a case here that I personally am fairly comfortable with what we're finding. No big surprises. So, do 5 years of data reflect the normal variability in water use? I find that the variances are low. The data is fairly tight. I first was concerned that maybe we might have some variability reflecting the fact that meters were changed. But Tim let me know that 2020, the first year in this 5-year period, all of the meters had been changed by then. And I want to ask you again, Tim, just to make sure, because you'll see on another slide where it's important. So the confirmation?
That is still my belief. Yes, we have metered water data for the 2020 year.
Yep. Okay. And if you look at the data across all the watersheds, there's variability, but not unexpected. So I think that this is the good way to be looking at recent septic nitrogen removal when these areas are sewered. And if you look ahead by the year 2031, when we're working on getting a new permit, we've got 10 years worth of data, and there's statistical approaches you can use to determine whether or not data with scatter is actually increasing or decreasing or not. So, and I'm looking back at the growth factor that's built into Meeting House Pond, for example. We relied on SNP data, and I think probably no harm done, because the watershed permitting approach allows the growth estimate to be changed every 5 years. So I'm predicting the growth allowance for Meeting House Pond will come down.
So Mike,
So-
one quick question, it might be more for Tim, but how many of the parcels did you use what I'll call that proxy number, where they were totally on wells, not able to have the quality of cellular meters? I just want to be sure that 100, what was it, 170, 179 you said you were using, might not need some further field sampling or something to confirm that that's a valid number. It depends on how many
Yeah.
parcels. If you got a handful, not a big deal, but if you're doing more than, I'd say 50 or 100, you might want to test that.
I mean, I think across the town, there's probably a couple hundred. Don't quote me on that, but that's what my recollection is. It's not a huge number of parcels,
Okay,
and I don't think that 20 gallons a day is across that is going to sway very much analysis.
And if they're scattered across the town, then even
right.
footnoting it in any study or any presentation puts it on the table and takes it off the table. That
Yep.
consideration.
Yeah, just good to think
And
about.
and I talked about the need to have a formal protocol. I will put in the draft protocol for review of the four towns. In the case of private wells, the town will use its best judgment to figure out what's appropriate for that location.
Right.
So you might decide, okay, there's an 82 in, hypothetically, in the Pleasant Bay watershed, and this evaluation leads to an average of 170, so we're going to use the 170. I don't think it's going to make a difference here.
And it might not be a fair statement, but I would think that even though they might be scattered around town, they would generally be in those areas of least density, which means they are also likely the areas least likely to be sewered.
Yep. Yep, I like that. So the fun thing about our discussions every couple of weeks, folks, is that Kevin is gracious enough to let us have some side discussions. How about this? If, let's say there's 200 across town in Orleans with private wells, and we're using 150, 160, 170. Let's go across the Nauset Harbor over to Eastham. And when the MEP report was done for Nauset Harbor, Eastham did not have anybody on public water. So the SMAS work was based on the then Pleasant Bay wide estimate, average of 148 gallons per day.
Here we go.
Okay, so if you're Eastham, and you're saying, you mean I'm going to be committing to removing nitrogen based on an estimate from a different watershed and no real Eastham data? What?
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard that every meeting we've had with Eastham, they've
Right.
raised that point. So, a bit of an aside, but I think it's pertinent. You gotta know the location, you gotta know the number of samples and how you apply them, and getting to know the database is kind of a summary of what Tim and I have been doing in the past few weeks.
Yeah, this is great, Mike, really is.
Okay, one more mathematical exercise here. So what can we learn from the annual variability? So what I've done here for 4 examples is I've taken the average water use per parcel, and then each year I've compared it to the average. So notice in Barley Neck in my slide here, the average is 1.0 by definition. I normalized this. If you look at 2020, it was 1.16, so 16% higher. You look at 2024, and it was 0.94, so 6% less than average. So these numbers are, here's 4 examples: Barley Neck, Uncle Harvey's, Meeting House, and Lonnie's. And then I shaded in yellow the highest of the 5 years. And look at that, 2020 was the highest in all 4 ones I picked. And that's when I picked the phone up and said, Tim, are you sure those don't reflect the prior meters? And he corrected me, they don't. I shaded in green the lowest of these normalized figures, and they were largely in 2024.
Right, that 20 was first year, as
was
John
first
said,
year of
COVID. A lot more hand washing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and a lot of people pouring,
A lot more
yeah.
people out here on the Cape.
Right.
So then I said, well, just a minute now. These are total water use. We got to worry about consumptive use. Yes, we're going to use over the short term 10%, but look at how the summer rainfall varied. When I say summer rainfall, I'm saying the 5 months, June, July, August, September. No, 4 months, June, July, August, September. And the typical summer average at the Chatham Airport over 20 years is almost 11 inches. Look, in 2020, it was only 4 inches. That was a really dry summer. So I think that's the most likely reason why all of the
Watering their
the
lawns.
in that column.
Yep.
Look at 2024, 15 inches, 50% wetter than average. So, so therefore the water use was
We're
less.
still in a drought condition?
We are.
Yeah,
How did that happen?
we are.
But interesting, look at 2021, the
we
numbers are
go.
all greater than 1, and it was a wet year. So we can't pin all of our explanation on rainfall.
Right.
And I, for one, am looking forward to the 2025 data, because look at the bottom of this slide. Last year, the summer rainfall was just over 3 inches. So there's going to give us one more
There's why.
one more set of data to pine on. So I hope that answered, or gets to Jenny's question.
It does. I think it would be fascinating to know if the water use in the downtown actually went down in 2020 because the restaurants were closed and, you know,
Yeah.
commerce was at a stop. But to take the 2025 numbers, just so you know, Mike, we had water restrictions in place for 2026, starting May 1st. We have banned the use of all automatic sprinkler systems. Right. So I would think that the water use data for this summer is going to go down even more.
Yeah. And could I ask someone on the committee to give me a quick paragraph that summarized the nature and extent of water use restrictions in each of these years?
I can send that to you. Yeah, I could do that. I have it memorized if you,
Thank you. Now,
okay.
so remember, growth in this setting is increase in watershed nitrogen load. So we're going to treat differently things that are related to new houses and occupancy from those things that impact consumptive use. So you've got multiple layers here, a broad matrix of factors, and I like where we are. I think we're all thinking in the right direction and can use our experience and knowledge based on this information to pick the right level of growth, knowing all these factors. So getting to the end, I showed you the slide that had the average per parcel water use. I expanded it to show the nitrogen load per parcel in kilograms per year. And remember, we had used 4 or 4.5 as a placeholder to kind of get started on sewer planning. Pleasant Bay, the actual number for the past 5 years is 6.5. The lowest ones are in the 3 to 4 range, kilograms per year per parcel. The highest ones are in the 7 to 8 range. But the beauty of this database is that Tim can call up the numbers for each neighborhood within each proposed sewer area. And that's a great advantage of this system. So in conclusion, let me just tell you where I'm going with this. Tim and I are gonna refine what you've seen so far with a focus on comparing the most recent 5-year average in terms of nitrogen load per sub-watershed and look back at the SMAS and the SMAS data from MEP and SNAP to make sure that we haven't missed anything. And I'm going to move forward, charge ahead with the fact that everybody will be updating their growth estimates based on 10 years of data in 2030. And that when somebody needs to claim a credit, they're going to use the most recent 5-year average. I'm going to document this in a memorandum that's part of my work for the Alliance. And I'll have that ready to share with you 2 weeks from today. And based on today's presentation, I hope you'd be okay with me also using Orleans data to illustrate these concepts for the full Pleasant Bay watershed work group that same day. Actually, earlier that day, 8:30 for the Pleasant Bay group and 10 o'clock for you guys.
Committee fine with that approach? Seeing nods around the table, Mike. That sounds great. Do
Good,
Really
good,
good.
good.
you want an approval now? I think we know
Well,
that.
I'm gonna send it around a memo, Kevin. Maybe
Yep.
you guys can take a straw poll on the memo.
Okay, we'll do.
So one broad conclusion is you guys always make good decisions, I think, and the deciding to move ahead with the database, all the things it accomplishes, I really think you made the right choice. Just the aspects of it I've had to use, I think it's been good. Tim does a great job. So congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And Tim, I made an, it is.
Great.
It really
Thank
is.
you.
And again, back to the water commissioners who made that decision, and the town invested, I think, Lynn, you know the numbers, was it 2 million for the cellular? It was a large number, but we got it past the town meeting on the basis that this would be good information for users. We're not even at 20%, but, you know, beside the point. But the staff are using it, and we're incorporating all that detailed data to give confidence to what Mike has shared. Because again, we don't want to be Harwich, and what year was that, Mike? 2003?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, 2004.
that's not a good place to
Wobbly
be.
data, right?
Yeah.
And can we get these slides?
Yeah, we certainly do. Mike shares them right after, we'll get him around. So, Tim, one thing I had for a future agenda, when do you think sharing an update on this water use, I call it the sewer database, because I think the more we can see, as Mike said, the parcel watershed identifiers, to, you know, whenever you're ready to share, I'm really excited to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the next step, and I was actually working on that, scheduling the next step this morning. But I'd like to, I think there's been a lot of progress around town with other databases that play into and are play with the sewer database. So we're going to set up a meeting with staff and just make sure that we're reflecting all that information and that we know how to lift information out of those databases. And then, so I think I'm probably going to target, I was just looking at calendars this morning, and I'll check and see if we can get a meeting set up for that in April. And then we want to move forward and basically just move into the actual programming and design that'll create those interfaces that you're looking forward to seeing.
Great. Nice.
Yep.
All right.
And Kevin, I will change these slides into a PDF format and have them to George by noon.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Mike. Next item, we've got our approval of minutes. And before we started the meeting, I did mention to folks I had just one minor edit on the Baker Pond sentence, just to add that was related to the proposed alum treatment. So Karen's got that edit. Any other edits or suggestions to the minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
We have to do.
Oh, we do need roll call. Mary, could you come off mute? How do you vote on the minutes?
I, Mary Wright.
Jenny.
Hi, Jenny Farber.
I, Judith Bruce.
Hi, Kevin Galligan.
Hi, John Smith.
Eileen Bruneau?
Abstain, Bob Mullen.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0, 1. All right, I noted just some future agenda items. The drought flyer, Jenny, you're gonna,
Just sent it to you.
okay, so Karen, on that, could we include that in the packet for the next meeting? Just as a way of public
Send it to you.
outreach and
Oh, the draft.
info.
To me?
Um,
Thank you.
Mike's going to have his memo on the watershed loads that we can formalize and vote on.
Final prep for town.
Final
meeting.
prep for town meeting.
Yeah, including any feedback and, you know, word on the street kind of stuff and so on.
And I think that's it. At 11:15.
Move adjournment?
Second.
All in favor by roll call, Mary?
I'm Mary Wright.
Hi, Jenny Farber.
I, Judith Bruce.
Kevin Galligan?
Hi, John Smith.
Eileen Bruneau?
Aye, Bob Mullen.
All right, we.